Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's online summit, Digital Transformation for Enterprises in 2023, Top Strategies and Getting Started. This event was organized by the hardworking folks at Redmond Magazine, Virtualization and Cloud Review, and AWS Insider, who have brought together some of the best independent experts on today's topic. Many thanks to our sponsors, Okta and A10 Networks, for making this event possible. And thanks to you for joining us. I'm John K. Waters, Editor-in-Chief of the Converge 360 Group of 1105 Media, and I'll be your moderator for the first of 3 information-packed sessions. But before we get started, a bit of housekeeping. Each of today's sessions is being recorded for later access. Keep an eye out for that email with a link to that recording. It'll be coming your way within the next few days. Each of today's sessions is being followed by a 5 to 10 minute Q&A. You could type your questions into the Q&A box at any time. Please feel free to add your questions as they occur to you throughout the summit. We will do our very best to get to all of them. Our sponsors have provided some extra resources that can be found on the right-hand side of your screen. Please take a moment to check those out. At the end of this summit, you'll be asked to take a very short survey. Please take just a moment to share your honest opinions. Our editors actually read every comment. I know, I'm one of them. Your opinions help to shape our future events. And last but not least, at the end of the third session, one lucky attendee will be receiving a $1,000 Amex gift card. I'm guessing our prize department was a little exhausted by Christmas shopping and went right to the cash. But you must be present to win, so stick with us. Now let's get started with our first session, Digital Transformation, Trends for Enterprise in 2023, Essentials for the Discerning IT Leader. For this session, we called on Bola Roterby, Chief of Enterprise Research at analyst firm CCS Insight. For the past 25 years, Ms. Roterby has been working with, studying, and just generally immersed in everything from engineering to software development and IT analysis. A chartered engineer, she has in-the-trenches experience with application development and network computing in a wide range of industry verticals. As an analyst, she has built a broad portfolio of product evaluations, strategy reports, and competitive analysis. She's an in-demand industry watcher, an old friend, so I know that you're in for a great session. Take it away, Bola.
Thank you very much, John. First of all, I'd like to say hello to everyone and welcome to my keynote presentation on digital transformation trends for 2023. Essentials for the discerning IT leader. As John says, my name is Bola Roterby, and I'm Chief of Enterprise Research at CCS Insight, a UK-based IT analyst and advisory firm that has a global coverage. Today, my presentation will focusing on identifying some of the trends that I see in my role as an independent IT analyst and researching the technologies, development and delivery strategies, processes and tools targeting enterprise organizations looking to digitally transform their operations, and also from talking to many different other, the ecosystem that forms this world of IT. But before we get into the presentation, it's probably worth doing a recap on the tenets of digital transformation and why all the fuss, why all the fuss. I mean, I think crucially, at its core, digital transformation is the transformation of business activities, processes, competencies, and models to fully leverage the changes and opportunities of digital technologies. I personally think that while many people have talked about, the digital technologies, it is actually fundamentally, a business-led change. And it's, I think it's informed by a medium and long-term strategy that is about transforming core aspects of how the organization works internally. Now, the thing is that people have now moved on to talking not so much digital transformation, but also about modernization. The concept has morphed into, modernization, but that is underpinned by flexibility, resilience, with a capacity for more personalized, intelligent, and intuitive interactions. So it's about aspirations and adapting and evolving to stay fit for purpose and relevant to the way that I believe customers, workforce, and partners want to work and interact. But neither can it be done in a vacuum. So this is one of the reasons why it's actually really important that we look at the external forces and factors as well as the changing operational and behavioral dynamics that shape and flex the transformation or modernization process, so as to provide the guidance for all the different stakeholders and the relevant stakeholders looking to evolve or update their own transformational journey planners. So let's look at thinking about the start of 2023, one of the things that as an analyst we often get asked is, how much will it be different to 2022? And I suspect many would hope for a significantly more positive 2023 than the year we've just left. But is it a case of, out with the old and in with the new? Well, and I would have to say a bit of a spoiler alert, but much of the change dynamics of 2022 will continue in 2023. And what do I mean by this? I think there's going to be a lot of the same cross-cutting organizational drivers that we saw in 2022, and they will continue into 2023. I would hazard a guess that what we are looking at is the formation of the new normal, and certainly for the foreseeable future, because at the end of the day, software technology, and the applications and systems that we build are integral to the way that we function as a society, and they serve the backdrop of the drive towards technology and digitalization as a means to help transform operations. So one of the things that we've seen at the as we've come into 2023, and certainly was picked up a lot in 2022, was transformation of the workforce, especially as we went from, remote operations as a result of the pandemic, and people looked into ways of how they worked. It really accelerated some of the things that had started before the pandemic in terms of, the collaborations and the video streaming, and it really put them into overdrive. And I think one of the things that really allowed people to realize that, we can do this. We can work from home, we can work remotely, and people, at the beginning we thought everyone was going to be at home and then maybe not go back to the office. Now it's transitioned. We've had what we've been known as a great resignation. I like to call it the great realization, actually, and more of the case of we can work in a different way. And so basically, that has meant, the workplace has had to change. And that in that change, so has the technology supporting that change. And new processes have had to come around and new tools and solutions. One of the things that is the big focus last year was on business resilience. Once again, it's, that was accelerated and driven and, spotlight on that as a result of the pandemic in terms of everyone had to run to being remote. And it put a spotlight on how did our businesses work when things like these external factors suddenly happen. And I think more and more organizations recognize that they needed to, business continuity plans needed to be brushed up and, not just as like a formality, but really become more active. And, look at our underlying system. So this is where, cloud really came into its own. It was already on a trajectory of, adoption. But I think, the remote, transition to remote, I think people actually started to understand what this actually meant, and also in terms of how we worked. Then data-driven enterprise, that's the other side, which was really the enterprise. In fact, not just the enterprise, everywhere is full of data. We've got so much data out there. And, data is great. I mean, people talk about it as the new oil. But, oil on its own doesn't really, can't really do much. Insights, that's what we need from it. And, that was suddenly realizing that actually we could get those insights. We had technology, artificial intelligence, machine learning came into it. But actually it was more about if we could understand what the data the vast amount of data that we have, we could actually start to really think about the kind of operations we built, the kind of operations we ran, the kind of decisions we made, and the kind of, personalization that we could give both to our employees and experience as well to our employees and to our customers, and the kind of interactions we could have with our supply chain partners. And so that really kind of pushed up the whole digital experience on steroid. So those were the things that were very much 2022, and they are going to be very much the 2023, moving over into 2023. But what is the transformation focus of 2023? Well, CCS Insight every year does a wonderful event, and of course I would say that because it is wonderful. It's called the CCS Insight Predictions, and last year we did 2023 and beyond. And what that does is that we look at a lot of the a lot of predictions around the players, the technologies that are really shaping things, the regulations, the social behaviour, the business dynamics, and we look at what is going to happen over the course of the next years and decades. Actually, we have some fairly amazing predictions spanning quite a long time. And what we focused on really this year, 2023, was really about the digital world, the digital society, and the digital self. And what do we mean by the digital world, and the digital world is very much looking at, it's very much looking at the wider aspects of things, so looking at infrastructure advances, looking at business, business opportunities, sustainability, connectivity providers, regulation, and the opportunities, and that was very much, a macro view of the ICT industry. So, and especially looking at the geopolitical landscapes, new kind of regional, dynamics and supply chain industry issues, which there were many of. And we kind of expect that going to be, still continuing to 2023, especially as now that almost everywhere is open, but, COVID hasn't completely receded. So there's still kind of like, we're seeing changes, not so much to the just-in-time things, to more onshoring and looking at how we actually get greater visibility into the supply chain and greater resilience and all this kind of stuff. Community was focused on, technology trends and employee behavior, as we said, the workplace transformation. This is really, and that is exactly, or digital society was very much along those lines. So looking at how we actually work today and how the enterprise environment changes, but also the kind of key players in that, the communication guys, the kind of telecom operators, the hyperscalers, how they kind of positioning themselves to kind of be the new kind of relationship builders, the new kind of like connectors to the enterprise. And then looking at how once again the employees work together, looking at customer the customer experience. And the digital self was all about the individual, focusing on the devices we choose, and the wearables, and the user experience that those deliver, and how we experience, the emerging digital domains such as the smart home and the connected car. So these are things, whilst we may not, think about from an enterprise point of view, well, okay, what does this mean for the IT operations? These are things that everybody has to think about in terms of the external factors. Nothing is in a vacuum. And, the way we work is exactly, part of, the consumerization of the workforce. We're all consumers. We now have powerful devices in our hands, and we do things, and we have an expectation for that experience to happen. So this is the thing. So what does that mean also? Well, uncertainty, instability. We can't look. Is there an upside? Well, I mean, unfortunately, the macro climate is challenging, and it's challenging across the globe. Although there are pockets of green shoots, as they would like to say. I mean, the IMF has come out and said, maybe things won't be as bad, and we may not be in so much of a recession, although for us in the UK, not so good. It wasn't a great reading today that we found out from the IMF. Things are shrinking, but at the same time, lots of people, there are still lots of uncertainty, war in Ukraine, inflation and economical downturn, but all around the world, inflationary pressures are coming down. Then there's the geopolitical side, the environmental side is really now ramping up. We can all see, some of the impact and the changes, and that's, a worrying thing, and so that's having a real effect on consumer, confidence and business as well. There's a lot of challenging times, a lot of sort of instability, but I don't want to feel like it's all gloomy, because there's a lot of positivity and a lot of opportunity. I mean, a lot of people talk about technology transformation, technology underpinning that. Still a people thing, but it's technology helping us to move forward. A lot, if anyone sort of enjoys reading earning reports, a lot of the companies have said, technology is a great, deflationary, sort of factor, and a productivity aim. Connectivity and devices, we can do so much more, and then the corporate social responsibility. I think that's really kind of an uptick, because we've got greater spotlight on sort of diversity, equity, and inclusivity, and all of those really, really great things that are happening. So not such a whilst it's not brilliant, but it's not so bad either. So the user experience side, and that's really, the user experience. I mean, we all now want a great user experience. In fact, actually, we all can expect a great user experience. And it's focused not just on in the individual and the customer, which was really kind of probably pre-pandemic, was really kind of a customer user experience. It's actually also focused on the employee experience, because people now recognize that actually, a good customer experience must also be fed off by a good employee experience. And this is actually, being brought, home, under the spotlight a lot more, especially with, hybrid working conditions and workplace transformation. And in fact, actually, that's one of the things I think, sort of 2023, will really bring out. People want to retain their and need to retain their workforce. They need to attract new talent, and they need to kind of engage the workforce in a much more exciting and empowering way. And I think that's one of the things now, is that a recognition that your workforce is as much your value and your goal and the means by which you can grow in the digital economy as it is as attracting the customer, and as well as having that part of the supply chain, that whole experience. So it's a cross-border, sort of experience for everyone. And one of the things that we had in our predictions that we expect in 2023 to see the demand for solutions that measure and trace the link between employee and customer experience. And we see this driving interest in certainly technologies that, from companies that measure the relationship between employee and customer experience, so it can help the business to justify and demonstrate the impact of their employee experience and investment, which is great. That's what we all want. The other thing is hybrid, sustainable, and social. And, absolutely, sustainability is kind of like, in the IT industry, we often have the buzzword, the latest buzzword in this one. I think sustainability is a very important focus, and in fact, something that everybody needs to kind of like take on board. And I don't mean just when we talk about sustainability, it's not just about sustainable operations. That's really important. It's a combination of things. It's environmental. It's obviously social values and ethical corporate governance, as well as diversity, equity, and inclusion. But it's also cost optimization, employee well-being, and health and safety. At the moment, the focus tends to be much more on the environmental, because that's the one that's easy to measure. But in reality, it's all a combination of those things, and, when we talk about, sort of net zero, many companies have now committed to having a net zero operation either by 2025 or up to 2050. And we're seeing organizations and companies at a national and international level really driving this forward. It is about how we kind of like, keep that, measure that. We've seen a lot of movement from the hyperscalers about talking about, clean cloud, et cetera, which is really important. And that's a really, really, these are really important trends for the stakeholders to think about. But I would also add that while measurement is really important, the thing is what you do is what you then do, right? It's good to measure it, but then what do you do about it? How do you then make the change? And I think that is something that's going to be a real thing in 2023 and going forward. Maybe towards the end of 2023, we need to measure it first, and then we need to enact and change and do something about it rather than just measure it. Transformation dynamics of 2023. I think that's this is going to be really great. Oops, good Lord, I'm moving ahead of myself a little bit. So we've already kind of, what I wanted to do is kind of put some numbers to this, and sort of just to say that it's not just me saying this, although it is a little bit me saying this. We've gone out every year. We do a big study. We do a number of studies, and one of them is kind of like our employee, workplace study, workplace transformation study. The other one is our senior leader IT investment study, which we go out into about 1,000, respondents across the globe to kind of understand what are the big IT investments people are making, what are the priorities, and also what are, how employees working with their devices, how often are they on their devices, what are the things that are moving and shaping things. And one of the, the sort of the big, take home for from the results of these studies is that the appetite for hybrid working is very much in place. It is exactly what, what we are seeing now is that people want flexibility in that. So I don't think people want to sort of work from home the whole time, and nor that can they for lots of sectors. But I think actually where they can, they really want the flexibility. And I think that's one of the things that's really kind of like, it can challenge an organization in terms of ensuring that their infrastructure is up to the speed, right? Their networks can cope with it. Their security controls are in place. So, this is putting the pressure in terms of thinking about, what does the IT estate need to look like when you happen to deal with people who are not in the office but at home, or remote working, which doesn't matter where they may not be at home. How does the infrastructure look like that? How can it cope with, sort of like the security, to ensure that you're not, you don't have any vulnerabilities. It means upgrading some of the, solutions that you might have in terms of whether that's, your SD-WAN networks or your LAN networks. So that really is, requiring a transformation, but actually also opening an opportunity to rethink about how, the IT estate looks like. Because once you start making that as a, let's say modernized, approach, then you can start doing other things as well. So there is the appetite. So the one feeds off the other, but it requires companies to really think about what does that IT infrastructure need to now look like? Where do I need to make the changes in order to ensure that I can satisfy and retain my workforce? So one of the things that the other thing that we're seeing, team collaboration and employee engagement required for hybrid work. So, saving employees time, is one of the things that this graph really sort of helps to identify. In terms of where are the kind of primary investments for employee enablement. And it's about time saving because it's about productivity, it's about efficiency, it's about how do I quickly get those tasks done, and so that I can then focus on other things. And I think one of the things as well is that when people are kind of working in remote operations, they're not in the branch office or anything like that, or in the office, the building, then they need those tools and solutions that are really going to make their life easy, whether that's streaming solutions, whether that's devices, and and also how they get to do their work. So access to the directories, a much clearer understanding in terms of how they interact with their colleagues who may also be either in the office or working remotely. But they also want the same experience as well. They don't want to feel that there is a difference or a second-class citizen, that if you work from work remotely, that you don't get the opportunities to have a good connection into the office, or that you feel that you're left out of the meetings, that we lost that water cooler moment that everyone talks about. So that's one of the things that we're seeing. And in fact, the tools are moving in that direction. They're so much more better. And every year they're evolving. They can do so many more things, cut out noise. I'm amazed that 25 minutes in, and I haven't actually said the word metaverse yet, although I've just said it now, so there's one thing. But the kind of that digital immersion that we're sort of talking about. The metaverse is kind of like the future and where we're going to. Certainly the devices have to certainly come cheaper, but that whole kind of how do we use the digital world that we're creating into a more immersive, sort of immersive engagement between people. So that's one thing. Kind of got ahead of myself a little bit here. So this is around one of the sort of the findings we saw in terms of how many people are using extended reality devices. It was quite amazing, really, actually. There's a number of devices, at least one or two devices that people have in there, for either augmented or virtual reality. And also we're starting to see this, especially when we think about, sort of digital twins and, the sort of like simulated environment to kind of help, sort of people, overlay, construct a digital representation of something physical so that they can actually look at it in a remote fashion, maybe make some changes or learn how to operate it look at simulations around it, make it, improve it without necessarily having to kind of like go back to maybe the expensive making a change at the physical layer, but try it out first. So I think that's one of the things that is really driving that, and I think eventually the metaverse will add another dimension, if one can make that. I don't know if that's a dimension joke, but anyway, there it is. But as I said, one of the things we are finding out is kind of remote and expert assistance, virtual meetings, sort of data visualization. That's a really great one to allow people to look at different ways of sort of visualizing that data, and then maybe coming up with different insights as well. But also, because as I said, a picture says 1,000 words, and sometimes when you look at the data, it can surface some important insights that can help sort of drive decision making. The other area is fixing the modern organization conundrum, and that is skills deficit, people, balancing those needs. I mean, a lot of things we always hear as analysts is that we've got a talent challenge. People are, there's so many people after the same talent, the same, if I could actually say one of the things that out of every, sort of survey I've ever run and I've ever really seen, and the one sort of thing, where's the biggest challenge and where's the biggest barrier? And I think the biggest barrier is always we don't have the people with the skills. We don't always know how to, sort of write these applications or how to begin to start something. We're missing the skills. Skills is one of those things. I would actually, sort of put up there as, it's fundamental. But on top of that is that, one of the things is that I think we need to be clever. We need to get more clever about how we kind of identify where we're missing skills and how we fill them in. And I think this is something that we're starting to see, and certainly 2023 is going to push that, which is, in fact, it's one thing, we've got lots of people. Organizations have a lot of people. And, there's a lot of people with lots of different sort of capabilities, different skill sets, which actually, when you look at it, suddenly overlay on other skills that maybe be missing. And I think people need to be more, organizations need to be more clever about this. And we're starting to see that in some organizations where they're looking at, solutions and applications that actually measure or look at the skills of their people, their workforce, and they kind of like segregate them down into, sort of probably behavioral characteristics, skills characteristics, capabilities, and then overlay that on the jobs where they're, where they could do, so it'd be multiple, that kind of flexibility, that opportunity to kind of like, I don't need to just be this kind of person for this job. I can actually maybe broaden out and do this kind of job because I have that experience, or I have that, that insight, or I kind of have that, other skill set. And I think that's what we're going to see. So I think there's going to be a lot more cleverness and nuance in terms of how we apply the skills that we already have in the organization. Because guess what? Inside an organization, we have domain experience. We have people who understand their industry and understand their business and understand their organization. And you kind of want to leverage that. That's mining that and ensuring that you kind of make sure that talent and giving people the opportunity to kind of try out in different areas and really retaining that and engaging them. So ultimately, when we think about the talent, making it circularity, it's about kind of these four areas, which I think, anyone who's seen me present before will see that I constantly use this slide, and it's always about an evolution and renewal, but it's about value engagement. It's about having the right, sort of application technology that really encourages and drives cross collaboration. It's about what I've just talked about a few minutes ago about cross-functional opportunity. So looking at sort of how people what skills they have, what capabilities they have, and then sort of seeing where they could be applied elsewhere in the organization. I think that's what we're going to see a lot. But at the end of the day, it's about education and training, and making sure, because often the challenge is the first thing that goes, whenever there's a kind of like, a pressure on cutting costs and things like that, education's out the window. And that shouldn't really be the first thing that anyone thinks about, because there's so many different ways now that people can get, sort of can learn new capabilities. Many of the, sort of vendors provide on their website and elsewhere. And, this good, magazine here also provides opportunities to, sort of train, sort of people to get insights and information and try things out. And there are lots of things that I see, which is exciting, sandboxes from different organizations to people to try and, sort of environments, try new applications, try different configurations. There's a lot out there that people need to be sort of leveraging, and I think that's really, really important. And, so when the pressure comes to kind of cut, education and training support, don't. So now I've talked about macro environment, and I've talked about, challenging global, sort of geopolitical and, uncertainty and stability, and instability, and that might make people feel that they are that no one's going to invest, everyone's going to sort of batten down the hatches. But actually, when we did our survey, our study at the end, at the back half of 2022, so this is the next up until next time, we'll be rerunning that survey again. We found that actually there's still people who the increase, there'll still be around about 15% increase. There's still people who are looking to increase their, sort of by 15%. The numbers, who go beyond that have come down since we looked at it the year previous. But that's really good. That's really, really exciting. That's really good for opportunities. But I think what we're seeing is people, right? No bad thing, because it's actually really important that you focus and look at the business value, sort of the outcome that you're looking to achieve, in terms of, sort of achieving that and driving that, and looking at the tools and the technologies that will let you get to that point, as well as where you're starting from and better understanding where you are. So I think that's one of the things. That's a really good thing. I think technology, I think organizations need to spend. You can't cut your way out of growth. You can't cut your way to growth. One needs to spend, but one needs to be careful about how one spends. And the way to be careful about that is having, sort of a clear understanding of what the value you're trying to get from your IT investment and the outcomes that you're trying to achieve, and what tools that, that are already at your disposal, and what you can get from your providers, and working with your providers in a much more sensible and collegiate and collaborative way. As one will expect, global recession and IT, that's obviously delayed projects, IT projects. It has, seen a shift to outsource IT services and apps. Certainly, sort of SaaS solutions has grown, and but at the same time, conversely, we've seen, sort of move and outsource in. What we are seeing, actually, I can tell you now, is that there is a kind of balance between kind of managed service provision for various, capabilities, whether that's security management or, or running particular applications. Because I think one of the things that we talk about is really, the complexity, and we'll have a slide later on for that. But let me move on. So, even though as grows, hurdles do come about. So one of those is difficulty recruiting people with the right IT digital skills and the rising cost of IT talent. There's no way getting around that. But also, what I would like to say, and the reason I put this up here, because we've been looking at industry verticals and doing studies around particular industries, and we've got one coming up on the financial services industry. But this is how it changes for different industries. So it's not across the board. When we did our study around telco market, for them the biggest kind of challenges was difficulty sourcing hardware. One of the things, rising cost of external IT services and rising cost of IT talent. That was kind of like one that was shared in the top, certainly the top three for the other side. It's not always, one of the things that one needs to remember that, it isn't, consistent, and it's not always the same across different industry verticals, which is why one of the big trends I would say that is, has always been there, but I think we'll get a lot more in terms of spotlight, is actually looking at, vertical solutions. We're going to start seeing industry solutions really being ramped up this year and going forward, which is one of the reasons why I think that's going to be tied into that more targeted spend. Actually, at the end of the day, it's great to have all these horizontal capabilities, but what organizations want is, what does it mean for my business in this market? And in fact, only last week when I was talking to a whole load of a bunch of enterprise organizations, and one of the things that they really drive for is actually, I want my community, my ecosystem of suppliers, partners, and workforces to understand what it is that my business is, how my business operates, what are the pressures I face, as well as, sort of like the opportunities that may be open to me, whether those are orthogonal opportunities or else. So that way, people are going to be looking for organizations, tools and services, all of those that have a kind of industry flavor that sort of shows that somebody actually understands more about the market that that an organization operates in. So I'm going to wrap it, quickly move on, because we have quite a lot to cover, and I'm being told my time check. I do want to give everyone a bit of time to ask questions, because I see quite a few coming in. Security dominates IT investment priorities. Absolutely. I don't think I've ever been, as an analyst, and I've been an analyst for the last, 23 years. That's showing my age. Prior to that, I was a senior developer and then an engineer, a chartered engineer of that. And security has always been a top line. It's always been a top line focus, because it's always, things are always changing. Vulnerabilities become open. But also, I think actually what's really important as we get more connected and, digitize operations, the vulnerabilities and attack surface, become more open. And, at the end of the day, it's not just, the sort of script kiddies, as they used to call them, who are trying to sort of show their kind of like, prowess, but it's, state sponsored. It's, it's people who want to steal IP. So I think security for a lot of organizations, especially when we get more complexity of things where sort of gaps can open up and vulnerabilities are there, is kind of a place where people are really kind of focused on, and where they're focusing their, sort of their investment dollars, because it's now, we need to have a much more integrated story around security, whether that's a security mesh, fabric. I mean, everyone has their own sort of, blanket for it, or blanket term for it, but also zero trust tolerance and zero trust models as well, because, at the end of the day, there will be a breach. And the thing is to minimize that, to find it quickly, but also to protect once something is, the sort of a bad actor has made has made an entry point, because that will happen. We just have to get better at kind of monitoring and finding it, but it's also thinking about the architectures we put in place, which is one of the reasons why we're seeing a lot more investment in managed service providers or fully managed service providers around the IT security side, and also operational support and cloud infrastructure, partly because these are quite complex environments. And there's a great complexity with more moving parts that often, the sort of, and, the talent, sort of shortage that we did talk about, you can't fill everything. So we're looking at people who have kind of centered, around centers of excellence with experience and knowledge. And so, we see that as as an area that's coming up. And once again, I like to show that, priorities change within sectors and for teams. Once again, this is from our telco differences. You will get these slides. You'll be able to have a look at them at your own leisure. I'm not going to go into them, but all I would like to say is that when we talk about network, cloud, and app dev, these were respondents who were mainly network guys, cloud service people within a telco organization or an app dev guy. And you can see they care about different things. So, that's one of the things that people need to think about as you kind of think about your projects, as you kind of think about where you invest, that the priorities, change for within your organization depending on who. So it's important that you get these people together and sort of understand where the overlaps, but also where, you have to make sure that, there are no gaps. One of the things we found, clear appetite for containers and Kubernetes being the next logical step, and sort of people use them for different types of applications, the level of portability. It is a high priority and it's growing, and it's part of the whole kind of move towards a kind of cloud native environment, PaaS environment. But that's not only it's not containers are a sort of technology concept that's been around for a number of times, and obviously they're changing from the cloud perspective. But I think this is something that a lot of IT teams are focused on and sort of implementing. And actually, it's not just the young, sort of new developers who are looking at this. In fact, actually, what we found is that a lot of the IT roles who are experienced are actually quite the most progressive ones in bringing in sort of new models and new programming models, and sort of really sort of getting to their grips. So that's another thing is organizations have these experienced people, and certainly the larger organizations will do, and rather than thinking that I've got to bring in brand new talent, a lot of this talent is already in there in your organization, and bursting to kind of take part and sort of be part of that growth curve. And sort of here it's just kind of talking about where we see the balance of power shifting towards IT a little bit. I mean, at the end of the day, 58%, 42%, by 2024, 2025. It's still a kind of still a joint exercise. It's IT and business, and that's what you've got to think about it. Okay, technology themes, and then we're on to the home stretch. And I think, I think we've got about 5 minutes. I'm going to whiz these through because they're always changing. But the big thing is cloud. I mean, the Lord cloud. We have accelerated to cloud, and cloud is very much here to stay. It is an important it's an important platform for for flexibility, for kind of innovation. People see it as a means of moving on to enabling new solutions, but also the backup as well. So there's a lot of things around it, and we see multi-cloud as being whenever we ask people, it's hybrid cloud, multi-cloud. It's the one thing is that it's a mix of environments. You're going to have cloud, and there are multiple cloud providers, as we all know. I don't need to name them all. I think we can all guess who they all are. But and the fact is, they all bring a level of capability and strength to the services that they offer. And for different organisations, they will be particular to one, sort of environment or, for a particular function and to another for a different function. And so therefore people want to have that choice. They will want to kind of go, and they may go down one particular path for a particular cloud provider and another path for another one. And so hence we're starting to see multi-cloud environments that, look at the management of all of these, different clouds, because that's actually ultimately what people really care about, is that, it's about getting the functionality, but also managing them in a kind of single control plane. And there are really, a lot of good, sort of providers and, but also leveraging off what they already have and what they, in terms of management control. So we see that, and we also see a lot of industry-specific focus cloud. So especially around data privacy, sovereign cloud is something that's coming up. We see many of the cloud providers talking about financial services cloud, retail cloud, marketing cloud, manufacturing cloud, telecoms cloud, and that talks to what I said earlier, which is about looking at trying to provide, an environment that is much more conducive to that, vertical sector, and understanding, what the challenges they have to face, all the constraints, whether they're regulatory ones. This talks to us about the proportion of IT workloads in the cloud. It's growing. That's all you need to know. It is growing every year. And I think some people are sort of thinking, will everything go on the cloud? No, I don't think everything will. For some people, they will be born on the cloud. But I think it will be a big mix, but it'll be part of a mix in terms of a hybrid environment. So I think that's one of the things. And, it's one of the main, areas of, sort of development. Automation, extensive automation. Automation is part of and underlying that productivity goal side. And the thing about automation is that it's nuanced. It's not just straight, But one of the good things about we're seeing, starting to see people looking at, is how technology is part of that automation story. And software, when we talk about code, infrastructure as code, it's all about automating and repeating, ensuring a level of repeatability and predictability, but also a really big home and use case for AI, which I think is the next one that we will talk about going forward. So I want to quickly move forward. We're seeing automation ramping up in the over the next 12 months. And we're seeing, sort of business, value prioritized, say, for instance, the telco market, most market, enhanced capacity management, ensuring consistent security, reduce infrastructure complexity. So the good thing about it, we start to see, sort of semi-mature deployment of automation, pretty much automation. I think most organizations they have an element of, semi-automation in things, but I'm not saying they're all brilliant. I think there will be some things that will get more automated, and that has to happen. We've seen RPA, sort of workflow automation as being a fundamental part of streamlining workflows between businesses, between departments within businesses, across the supply chain in order to add that level of productivity and efficiency. And we've seen that in no more. We've seen that in many kind of organizational across the market landscape in healthcare. In terms of ensuring that sort of different healthcare departments can sort of transfer data and talk to each other better. Sort of onboard patients easily. We've seen that in government sector. Self-service is another aspect of it. Citizens having a lot more autonomy as well. As part of that automation. AI, good Lord, that's AI is in its element, and we've all heard the sort of things around ChatGPT, generative AI, and that brings in a number of ethical and ethical dilemmas and responsible AI, and that's something that everybody every IT, everybody in the business, but particularly in IT, as you start to think about using, sort of machine learning, whether that's and computer vision, AI is an umbrella term for lots and lots of like the sort of later models. Absolutely fantastic, really important. What I say is the most important thing is accessible AI. That is one of the things that the phrase that I would like to call, well, I can't, admit to owning it because I've heard it many times, and I stand on the shoulders of other, sort of giants. But one of the things is that it's going to be much more about making AI accessible. It's not saying that the big language, sort of models aren't going to be important. I think they will always start to, they're getting to evolve. I think, those will be, at the moment it's all good fun. But I think the real, side is where we can use AI to augment our, sort of functions, our operations, AI ops, in, sort of improving the way operations, work, and sort of also helping to sort of drive, leverage data to drive new decisions. We've seen it in the coding side of, for developers where we see, sort of might GitHub Copilot. We see what AWS has been doing there as well with, a lot of their AI, sort of their sort of AI sort of code completion solutions. So I think this is really, really important. It's accessible. It's, and it's going to sort of help drive productivity. Adoption of AI is definitely mainstream. And there are challenges. Most of it is about building trustworthy systems, having that level of explainability, and observability. I think those are things that, when you're writing these AI, sort of models and using the AI to, as an underpinning of your applications, then there needs to be an element of sort of being able to, sort of explain why a decision was came to that, because people want to know that. Low code, fast code, and to be honest with you, low code, which is a really important. This is really important, and I think this is the one where a lot of developers will sort of well, it's low code for me, and it's the whole notion of anyone can develop, business people developing and everything like that. And I think it does open up the lower the barriers of entry to building applications. But this is an important slide because I do believe that, low code is really great for even professional developers because actually they want to be able to get to do things quickly, especially things that are repetitive. Why would you want to keep writing those things? That is really important. But actually they also want to be able to use low code capabilities in order to kind of like, move on to the next things, try things out, sort of, move on to things where they, extending more of their kind of, sort of, their knowledge and their expertise. But one thing is that, is this going to be for somebody who's a business person? Yes, of course it will be. We've seen lots of great tools out there that allow people to do lots of great, sort of internal business solutions, but when we kind of think about solutions that are going out to a wider audience, especially for consumers and things like that, then the rules of application development, application lifecycle management have to be part of that governance model. They need to be a really kind of important piece, which is why we're starting to see kind of like people who are building solutions for low code solutions. They are going to be dedicated low code development resources as well as professional developers. And there will be non-technical business professionals in the same way that a lot of us have written macros in Excel. But to a certain extent, I think the reality is that what we don't want is to have this governance nightmare where there's a sort of an explosion of solutions that people can't manage, and then we'll all be blaming IT. Serverless, and once again, this is all about sort of microservices, looking at sort of the support in terms of moving out to managed environments, and once again speeding up the solution and the building of applications, and we see that really sort of moving forward. So 5G, absolutely, that is definitely coming, and we're seeing a lot more 5G capabilities, especially around sort of home working connectivity, and lots of organizations plan to invest in 5G. It is coming, and we're seeing much more networks coming into play, and the opportunities, and we're starting to see scenarios, business case scenarios, and that's really good. Quantum, the future. And, I think this is something that is going to be important. It's exciting. technology. It is, I think a lot more people are starting to think about it, as an important capability, especially when we're thinking about, the kind of the computational capabilities that quantum will, bring us, as well as, protecting ourselves against what it can break as well. But this is a really exciting area, but we're a long way out from that, but it's still there on the horizon, and people are starting to, sort of take shape of what they can do when it finally kind of hits the airwaves, the mainstream. So, 2023, hybrid is the reality, life of choice, and all this kind of stuff. No one product or technology. So, that is the case. It has always really been the case, but even more so. Recognize drivers and barriers to transform and execute, supporting attributes, having good process foundation, governance and flyers, and automation helps us do the speed control, workflow orchestration, and partners. Partners are really important in this, the partner ecosystem. Barriers, complexity, risk tolerance, culture. I didn't spend too much time on that. I would say that culture and people are the ones where one needs to kind of like really think about, because they are the drivers as well, and as well as the barriers as well. Complexity under applications in the IT estate. I don't think we need to spend too much time. I spent the whole time talking about lots of different things. And so, nurture the type of digital organization you need to be and want to be, not somebody who's going to be dragged behind or have feelings, but something that's much more about, sort of collaborative, getting the whole organization behind you, bringing them on board, and, sort of thriving as we go into the digital economy. I think that's me finished.
Bola, thank you so much. That was an awesome presentation. It is so nice to have you back. I hope to do this again soon.
Thank you.
Okay, folks, we're going to take a very short break. We'll be back at the top of the hour for our second session, 10 tips for getting started with digital transformation for IT leaders, led by the inimitable Howard M. Cohen and moderated by my colleague, Chris Paoli. Many thanks to Bola Rotterby for a great session, and to our sponsors, Okta and A10 Networks, for making it possible. Now would be a great time to check out those extra resources on your console provided by our sponsor. Remember, during the next session, we will be giving away a $1,000 Amex gift card to one lucky attendee. But you must be present to win, so stay tuned. Back in a few.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Thanks for being here. Thanks to our speakers, my fellow moderators, and of course, our sponsors, Okta and A10 Network, for underwriting this summit and allowing us to bring you this great content. My name is Chris Paoli, editor, and I'm here to moderate the second session of our Digital Transformation for Enterprises in 2023 Summit, called 10 Tips for Getting Started with Digital Transformation for IT Leaders. Our speaker for this session is Howard M. Cohen, Senior Resultant, the Tech Channel's Partners Result Group. Howard is a 40-plus year executive veteran of the information technology industry who today writes for and about the IT channel. He's a frequent speaker at IT industry events that include
Did we lose Chris?
Pardon for the interruption. Speaker will be back shortly.
Thank you, Alan. You know what, Howard? I'll actually let you introduce yourself and continue on your presentation, okay?
Okay, thank you. Hello, everybody. As both Kishana and Chris pointed out, I'm Howard M. Cohen. I am a creator of compelling content. Much of my writing is about the channel. Some of it's for the IT channel. Today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite topics, one of my very favorite topics. But before we do, those of you who have been with me before know that I like to start every session with a word of the day. That's the writer in me. And today's word is application. Now, not application in the sense you may be thinking. I'm talking about, well, let me give you the example that helps here. This young woman on the screen is holding something in her hand. It is an applicator. Okay, now what is the function of that applicator? And you're going to probably say to apply mascara. But that's not the ultimate function. That's not ultimately what we're looking for it to do. Its ultimate function is to make our eyes look beautiful. Okay, so it's not about what it is as much as it's about what it does. That's a very important concept. We don't focus so much on what it is, the applicator, as we do on what it does. So I'm not talking about a software application. Rather, I'm talking about the importance of the application of something to make something else better. Okay? One great example that was very, very frustrating to some people way back when is back when Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak introduced the Apple computer at the Homebrew Computer Club in 1978, I want to say. And everybody was very excited about it. They went out and they got themselves funding, and they built the Apple II. And the Apple II was not selling. Yeah, the members of the Homebrew Computer Club bought some, but normal people, regular everyday people, had no idea why they would want to own a computer. Again, this is 1980, 1979. You know, it's over 40 years ago. People couldn't figure out, what do I need with a computer? Then Dan Bricklin and Bob Frankston came along and introduced their product, VisiCalc. VisiCalc, the visible calculator. VisiCalc changed the way the Apple looked by putting something on its screen, a spreadsheet. Now, VisiCalc was the precursor to Lotus 1-2-3 and Excel. It was there first. And once people saw that they could put a ledger page on this computer, and the computer would do all the recalculating every time they changed something, whoa, now that's valuable. So they weren't really impressed by the Apple II. This is an Apple IIe, by the way. They weren't impressed by the Apple II itself for what it was. They didn't feel a need to own a computer. But once they saw what it could do, they became very excited, and they started buying them in droves. So it's not what it is, it's what it does. Which brings us to the topic of digital transformation. Digital transformation, I believe, now holds the record as the longest, most frequently used buzz phrase ever. Everybody talks about digital transformation. And if you look at Gartner, Forrester, BMC, Boston Consulting, if you look at Citrix, Microsoft, Red Hat, if you look at all of these primary players in the IT industry, each one has a definition of digital transformation that is different from the others. Although they do have a few things in common that I think you're going to see here in my definition. But before I get to my definition, let me tell you a few things that digital transformation is not. Okay, right here we see a company upgrading their computer hardware with the latest, greatest, most recent innovations in an electronic computer. And some people think that when you upgrade your hardware or even upgrade your software, well, now that is an upgrade. It's not a digital transformation. Okay, it's not. You haven't transformed anything. You've upgraded the quality and the features and functionality of the equipment you have or the software you have, and that's fine. It's also not this kind of transformation, although that would probably be fun. So what exactly is a digital transformation? My definition is that a digital transformation is not so much about technology as it is about people. Not so much about the technology for itself, as much as it's about what it can help people do better so that they can perform more productively, so that they can enjoy what they do even more than they did before, and they commit fewer errors. So whenever we're doing a digital transformation, it's the process that the people are performing that we're really transforming. And that rhyme was unintentional. It's really how to apply technology to take care of the scut work. Okay, the simple repetitive processes that people really shouldn't be doing in the first place. They're so simple and so basic that we can have automation do them. Now, of course, people are concerned that it will displace them. The objective here is not to displace anybody. The objective here is to give everybody more valuable, more productive work to do, more fulfilling work, more satisfying work. Very important. And you'll see why it's just so terribly important in just a second. So now that we've defined digital transformation as being about people and how we help them do better and enjoy more, one commenter said that digital transformation improves the way we live, work, and play. And I guess that's a pretty good, quick way to think about it. While we're thinking, here are a few other things to keep in mind. First of all, at the end of the day, we transform things process-wise, technology-wise. Everything we do is meant to improve one thing as an end result, and that is the customer experience, another buzz phrase that is rampant. Just as digital transformation is abbreviated as DX, customer experience is abbreviated as CX. So you do your DX to get your CX. And I can't overemphasize the importance of customer experience. If a customer is having a great experience doing business with you, they're going to buy more. Okay, and that's really what it's all about. They're going to buy more. You're going to generate more revenue because you have a happy customer who wants to do more business with you. By the way, for those of you who are wondering why I have this particular photo, some of you who are about as old as me will certainly remember that this is the great Jimi Hendrix, perhaps the greatest guitarist of all time. And his band was called the Jimi Hendrix Experience. And one of his best-known songs is Are You Experienced? So I thought it was a good opportunity to pay homage to one of the greats. Now, you can't achieve a great customer experience unless you can achieve a great employee experience. Remember, we said a moment ago that happy employees stand a better chance of creating great customer experiences. Well, that kind of means you've got to keep your employees happy. Now, I'm not saying, to throw them parties all the time and give them constant raises and bonuses. Those are all nice things. But there are a lot of ways that you can improve the experience that your employees have working for you. You can give them better tools by performing frequent digital transformations, as an example. You can be constantly checking to see what you could do to help them do better. Managers who encourage their people to share ideas like that are very successful managers usually. So the digital experience, the digital transformation should lead to a great employee experience that ultimately produces great customer experiences. Okay. Another thing to keep in mind that is often mistaken by many, many people is that digital transformation is not a commitment to a single event in time. People talk about, we're going to do digital transformation. And it stands alone. It's like a moment in time that we're going to do something, and it's going to change something, and that'll be good. That is not ultimately what digital transformation should be all about. It should be an ongoing process. Okay? I mean, we talk about ongoing processes all the time. For example, in DevOps, the goal of DevOps, bringing the developers and the operators together to deploy software faster, get feedback faster, and then get the next improvement to the software out faster. The goal is called continuous improvement through continuous deployment. CI/CD. Well, there's a CI/CD here too, and that is continuous improvement through continuous digital transformation, CI/CDT, if you will. But conceptually, it's important to remember that you should always be looking for opportunities to digitally transform processes. When you see something that's not performing as well as it could, when you see something that's lacking, that you're not doing at all, that you think, if we did that, all of these great benefits would ensue. To perform a great ongoing digital transformation, you kind of always have to be thinking digital transformation. And so it's an ongoing process. It goes around and around. It goes on forever. Before you can get that to happen, you've got to go get yourself buy-in. Okay, not buy-in like this at the casino, but buy-in as in not acceptance, not agreement, but enthusiasm. You need to capture the enthusiasm of the leaders of your organization, executive committees, departmental managers, those who are going to be impacted by this, your stakeholders, shareholders, as an example, even suppliers. And everyone you work with is a great source for insight that will help you lead to a better digital transformation. And getting their buy-in up front helps convince you, or helps assure you, I should say, that you're going in the right direction. And you're going to get great cooperation from all these people to help make your digital transformations successful. So the first step in anything is to obtain buy-in for your ideas. You also have to ask yourself who gets transformed and how. Butterfly is a great example of a transformation. Certainly the butterfly didn't ask for, but it's a beautiful result. Well, who in your organization it will be impacted by your digital transformation? Who and how? How will they be impacted by your digital transformation? It's important to think these things through because you're going to want to inform them before it happens. The watchwords, some of my favorite watchwords are no surprises. If you create no surprises, then everybody's ready for what you're doing and agrees with what you're doing, and it all goes very smoothly. Very smoothly. So who gets transformed and how do they get transformed? Crucial to communicate that to the people who are involved in the transforming processes. Okay. So we've got a couple of things to think about. We now have a good definition for digital transformation to ground ourselves in. Now it's time to talk about the process of getting started. How do you get started with digital transformation? And the very first thing you want to do, and some of you have heard me say this before, but accept the words of Simon Sinek, who encourages us to start with why. Why? Great book, by the way. If you haven't read it, do so as soon as you can. It's a phenomenal read. And Sinek says, you have to ask yourself, why do you want to make a change? Now, a lot of people say, well, it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's short-sighted. It's really short-sighted. It may be that you have opportunities to improve something that does work, but could work better. And that working better would really pay off for you. So look very closely at every process, at everything that's going on, and don't just stop at the things that you feel are broken. Look at the things that you think are working well and wonder aloud if they could work better. Determine why you want to make changes. Then talk about how you'd like to see it change and how you'd like to change it. What are the processes you want to change? How would they be changed? What would the end results be? And then finally, once you've determined that, you have a good reason to make this change and you know how it's going to look, then you start to talk about what you're going to change and what you're going to do to change it, the actual step-by-step. You're also going to ask yourself, what will that change disrupt? And this is not market disruption like we talk about all the time. This is really disruption within your own organization, because change can inadvertently cause new problems. It's just as simple as that. There are interdependencies between things. Some of those interdependencies are very tightly coupled to each other. So if you change one, you've broken the other. Some are loosely coupled, and you don't have to worry about it so much. They can tolerate the change. But you really got to look at what else will be changed by this, what will be impacted by this. Because the last thing you want to do is go 1,000 miles toward improving something and suddenly discover that you're the bull in the china shop and you've left a lot of debris all over the place. So start with why. The next step, and this is the most important step along the way in terms of actions that you will perform, is discovery. In this case, you're going to discover your current state, the current state of your technology implementations. And you're going to discover them in full detail. You're going to document all of the hardware, all of the software, all of the cloud and other services you're consuming, all of the users and user communities, and which applications each user community is using. You're going to perform an inventory of everything, because when you're setting out on a journey, the first point on the map that you need to begin with is where you are. And you can't begin unless you know where you are. So we start off by documenting where we are. What is our current state? Then we go in search of digital transformation opportunities. We now know where we are, our current state. It's time now to start designing our desired future state, where we're going to from here. Another point on the map that you must have a very clear picture of. So where will digital transformation opportunities come from? They'll come from everywhere. They'll come from every department. They'll come from every operation. They'll come from every branch office. And they're not only things that are broken, as I said before, they're things that are working but could work better, much better, and be far more productive and have a significant impact on the company's bottom line. So you have to really search for them. The best way to search for them, of course, is to ask the people who are most impacted, people who are performing each of these processes, the people who are working within the organization. They'll give you great ideas. And again, as I said before, interview all your stakeholders. What would they like to see working better? They have a stake in your organization. What would they like to see improved? Collect all of that information and begin to develop from that the ones that make sense to you and identify specific initiatives that you can take. Once you've identified them all, it's time to sort those opportunities by value. Which one is most valuable to the organization? Which one would give you the biggest payback? Because remember, a part of getting buy-in is literally financial buy-in. Some of the people who are buying in are going to buy in with funds to fund your digital transformation, fund all your activities. They're going to want to see payback to the company. And so getting early payback, getting early return on investment is very important, not only operationally, but also politically. You want to show people, yeah, I wasn't kidding. This is going to improve our lives. Some people say, do the easy stuff first. And that was a big strategy when we were first migrating to cloud. Migrate the easy workloads first. And from a practicing standpoint with a new technology, that made sense. Here, these are processes that you've been performing for a long time. And the technology acumen you need is something you can obtain in a lot of different ways. So I suggest that you prefer sorting each of your opportunities out by the value that it will bring to the organization when all is said and done. And once you've got these initiatives identified, and once you know which one you're doing first, second, third, and so forth, you may find you have enough changes to last you for quite a long time. But try to do them one at a time, because multiple digital transformations simultaneously can be confusing. And it's always better to focus. So now that you know what your initiatives are, you take the first one and you begin to identify technologies that can improve that first initiative, and then the next initiative, and then the next initiative. These technologies can come from anywhere. It may be new hardware. If you're in a physical security operation, you may find that simply obtaining faster storage is going to give you a productivity boost like you've never seen before. And so you just install faster storage, and you've got yourself an improvement. You've got yourself a transformation that changes the way your system operates. You may find that there are RPA products, robotic process automation, that can count things for you, sort things for you, feed envelopes or feed documents into scanners for you, and other processes. Those are simple transformations. Or you may find that you're simply on the wrong ERP. It's just not suited for the changes that have taken place in your business. So you go out and identify an ERP that's more configurable to your needs, to your functions, your operations. And that is a more considerable digital transformation as you go about changing all the processes that are suffering because of your current ERP. It's all over the place. And you never know where you're going to find the technology. And it may be that a given technology gets your thinking going about some of the processes in your company that could be improved. So these two could swap, the identifying initiatives and identifying the technologies. That's an iterative process too. That may feed upon each other very, very nicely. As you're doing all this, and this is going to come a little bit out of left field, but as you're doing all of this, one of the things I'd like you to think about is incorporating SaaS, software as a service, into your digital transformations. Because SaaS accelerates digital transformation. I'll tell you what I mean. When you first went to transition from on-premises computing to cloud, you probably moved to infrastructure as a service, IaaS, however you want to pronounce it, infrastructure as a service. So what happened was you no longer had the big boxes themselves. Your engineers could no longer hug their servers, but they also didn't have to power them or cool them or maintain them. You gave up all of that, but you still had to operate them. You still had to provide administration of them. You still had to make sure they were doing their job. The applications were running properly. There was a lot you still had to do that was really computing work, technology work. And many of you were probably not in the technology business. So you were employing people that you weren't sure you selected well, or you don't know how to incentivize well. You don't want to be in the computing business. You want to be in your business. So IaaS did not get you there. It got you maybe halfway there. When you migrate again, when you transition now to SaaS, software as a service, the service provider takes care of the servers. The service provider operates them, administers them. No, there is no such word as administrate. They administer them, they maintain them, power them, cool them. They do everything for them, including running the software on them. All you do is use the software. You are out of the computer business. You are into your business and focused in on what your applications are doing for you. And so as you're thinking digital transformation, think about investing significant time in identifying SaaS solutions that can perform the functions you want to improve and change. SaaS can really make a difference for you. I would be remiss if I didn't mention everybody's favorite. Now, while you're salivating, I'll tell you that I'm not talking about the bacon. Data is the new bacon. And so how are your data assets impacted by this change? Will you need to upgrade any of your databases? Will you need to restructure the data structures within your databases? Are there indices that will no longer be serviced or have to change to be serviced? There's so many things that can happen, so many interdependencies that occur when you're working with a database that you really need to spend focused time on looking at that data and determining how the data is impacted by the things you want to change. Everybody loves data for a reason, and that is because data makes money, right? It's data that makes money, and it only makes money when it's in motion. That is to say, when you sell data to somebody, when you lease data to somebody, when you rent data for some use, when you process data and return results, as long as the data is in motion, it's making money. And so all of your digital transformations need to be geared around the idea that we're going to make the data move to be productive for us. And we're going to make sure that we never damage the data, we never expose the data, we always keep the data secure from inappropriate access or harm. So the data is one of the things that you've always got to consider whenever you're considering any digital transformation. The other thing that you need to consider when you're performing any digital transformation is to focus on communication. Will your digital transformation improve the way people communicate with your systems and or the way they communicate with other people? Because every digital transformation should. One of the things you'll notice whenever you read a case study of a digital transformation is that people were better able to communicate with the systems they were using or communicate with each other to perform certain processes thanks to the results of the digital transformation. And since humans are every bit as important a part of our processes as the data is, this is crucial to spend some time on. And it also gets overlooked frequently. So how do we communicate? And then you're going to need to gather up skills. Okay? You're going to have to acquire certain new skills to do the things you haven't done before. If you're using SaaS, there are going to be fewer of them. But even within the processes themselves, you may have to retrain some of your employees to do new things, not like jujitsu the way Neo is learning here, but to operate new software in terms of using it, use new software, to manage processes that are being done in a different way. You may train some people. You may find yourself having to hire new people. You may find yourself engaging new people contractually for a brief time to provide some skills transfer or other things. But very important to think about that segment of the network that is hardest to manage, which is the part that exists between the keyboard and the chair, the user. It's very important to think about the impact upon the users, what they're going to need to know to be productive, more productive in this new world you're building for them, and how they're going to work once things have been transformed. And this is where they get transformed. Finally, before you do a thing, before you actually make your first connection between two devices in pursuit of your digital transformation, it is critical to define what success looks like. How will you know when you've completed your digital transformation? How will you know when you've been transformed? Clearly the Hulk knew, or actually didn't know, I guess, until he transformed back. But you must know where you're going to be, what you're going to look like, how things are going to be functioning when you have successfully completed your digital transformation. And then you can move on to the next digital transformation to achieve that continuous improvement through continuous digital transformation. I hope this has helped set the stage for the thinking process that goes into approaching digital transformation, and I certainly hope it's changed your thinking about what digital transformation really can be and what it can be for you and your organization. And with that, I'm hoping Chris made his way back to us. Do we have any questions, Chris?
We do, and I am back, hopefully for the duration of the rest of this presentation. Let's just jump right into questions, shall we? Here's a good one. Under what conditions do you know you need a digital transformation?
Oh, boy. Under what conditions? There's a lot of them. You may find yourself wondering why you perform a certain process. This is a good example. You may find that there's several processes that you go through every day, every time you do a sequence, that you just don't exactly know why you're doing them. And if you dig back, and if you have people still kicking around who were there long enough, you may find that there was an error or a problem that happened one time in the distant past. And because of that one time, they made a change, and that change now takes place over and over again every time they do this series. That happens a lot. People put extra steps into processes to solve a problem that will never recur. And now you've got people doing things wastefully. You may run into some of those. That's one good area to look to know that, okay, I think we need to think about planning a digital transformation for these processes. When you have employees who are complaining that it's really hard to get their job done for various and sundry reasons, and you've already exhausted the idea that this is just sour grapes, they're not really unhappy, you've proven to yourself, yeah, they have reason to be unhappy. And we need to fix this. We need to make it better so that they can do the work better and enjoy the work more. That's another good example. Things that keep breaking down because there's low resilience or low tolerance within your processes. When you see that happening, you know that something's not working right. Something's not going the way it's supposed to go. So you need to do the systems analysis that takes you back through the process and identifies what needs to be changed. Some digital transformations may be very small, but they are transformative, because when you go from something failing constantly to something working smoothly, that's transformative. When you go from an unhappy employee to a really happy, motivated employee, that's transformative. Basically, I suggest you, as a Bronx-born native, I suggest you follow the Bronx rules, and that is you go looking for trouble. Go looking for trouble. Go looking for things that are just not happening right, and figure out how impactful they are, and that'll tell you it's time for a digital transformation.
Okay, speaking of trouble, is it possible to plan several digital transformations all at the same time?
If you have several teams that are very separate from each other, you might. But as I said during the presentation, it's kind of like playing Wordle. If you change too many letters at the same time, you're not sure which one got you to where you're going. For the rest of you, it's a game like Hangman. I always like to make one change at a time to make sure that it's that change that created the difference that I'm looking for, and then make the next, and then make the next. Sometimes situation will not allow that. I get that. But if you can, let each transformational project stand on its own, and only consider parallel projects when you're really in a rush. And if you can possibly avoid it, never be in a rush.
Okay, we have a clarification question for you. You say a hardware upgrade is not a digital transformation, but what's the difference between them?
Okay, so we talked about focusing in on what it is versus what it does. Mm-hmm. When you're upgrading your hardware, you're basically upgrading what it is. It is a let's not go that far back. It is a 2018 computer server that has been upgraded and improved several times, has a bunch of new features and a bunch of new capabilities, and boy, we love it. So we're going to get the new one. And that's an upgrade. You've upgraded what it is. When we're looking at a process that isn't going the way that it should be going, well, you can't just go out and buy a new process and replace it. There is no process store, although I would almost believe that the Grainger catalog, it has everything else. It might have some processes. But in general, you can't go out and buy a new improved process. You really have to create it. That, to me, if it really transforms the way in which you do something, and if it really increases the value of that process dramatically, that is transformative. That is a digital transformation. But if you're just swapping out the hardware or even upgrading the software, upgrading software is better referred to as nightmarish. For those of you who've ever done it, it can be disastrous. Just kidding. There are sometimes glitches, but that's the difference between an upgrade and a digital transformation.
Okay, let's do another comparison, shall we? Tammy actually wants to know, what is the difference between an agile transformation and a digital transformation?
Okay. When agile is a methodology, right? It defines a methodology that we use by doing things in short sprints, making sure that what we did worked, and then moving on. So it's very iterative. Those short sprints may not have us impacting anything technological. I mean, there may be some changes to software that I think fall short of transformative. But if you're really using Agile for a transformative project, it may be that part of that is a digital transformation. Agile defines what people do to create the transformation. Digital defines what they use to create their digital transformation. Yeah, that works.
Yeah, I think that works great. Okay, concept of making an employee happy has been around for a long time. How does that tie into digital transformation?
The concept of making an employee happy has been around for a long time. Not everybody practices it. But I think that we're looking at a more in-depth level of satisfaction. That is to say, if you asked a manager 30 years ago, how do you make your employees happy? They would look at you and smile and shake their head and say, give them a raise, give them more money, give them a bonus. And I think that employee happiness was looked at with somewhat of a shallow gaze. Today, it's much more about keeping that employee motivated, keeping that employee enthusiastic about what they do. That requires involving the employee in their own processes and in talking about how to change those processes to make them better. Let them participate in the planning as well as the execution. These are much more higher level concepts of satisfaction. And, Maslow in the triangle of needs talks about the feeling of belonging being basic. You want to make sure they feel like they belong to the organization. But then at the peak of the triangle is self-actualization, where they're really living their best life and doing their best work. And there are many managers now who have it as a personal goal to help each of their employees achieve that level of self-actualization, as Maslow describes it. I think that's excellent. I know for myself that was always on my mind whenever I was managing people, and I managed a whole lot of people. And some of them are doing great things today because they achieved what I hoped I could help them achieve. So that's the difference between the old definition of employee happiness and the concept I'm talking about, having the ultimate employee experience.
Okay, let's wrap it up with one more. Under what conditions do you know you need a digital transformation?
Sounds like one we've already done.
Wait. No, it was a similar one to, is it possible? You know what? I think you're right. So let's call it there, shall we?
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Just remember that one time in which you know that you need a digital transformation is when you've finished one. Time to do the next.
Okay.
And let's leave it there.
All right. Thanks, Howard. Great talk.
Thank you, Chris.